Hello, and welcome back to the Adult Volunteer Literacy Tutor Training. This session is all about ESL, or English as a Second Language Learners, also known as EL, or English Language Learner. These are non-native speakers in an English-speaking environment, or people who have English as not their first language and live here. For these learners, we want to encourage them to speak English as much as possible and immerse themselves in English. When you tutor, you are only expected to tutor in English. No need to know a foreign language. ELLs are a special category of adult learner. They have many of the same characteristics as other adult learners, but they also face special barriers, including potential discrimination, the challenge of learning about and adapting to a new culture, and sometimes they were forced to migrate because of violence, poverty, or other reasons. Some of these learners may have had advanced education in their home country, while others might not have much formal education at all. Each learner is different, so don't make assumptions. Many of the techniques we use for EL learners can be used with native speakers as well, especially if they are native speakers with low reading proficiency. But not everything that works for native speakers works for EL learners, because the language they are working on, English, isn't their first language. Why, might you ask? Well, that's because of how the brain works with language learning. Think of an iceberg. This works as a great analogy for all our adult learners as well. What we see on top here, on the top of the iceberg, is the knowledge they can show us, what they can produce, such as speaking or writing. In teaching, we call it performance knowledge. However, beneath the water, below the surface, is the unseen knowledge. Reading and listening is down here, but it's more than that. This also includes our experiences, all the tricks we've used to get by, and any tips we've gained to help us with our understanding, and the performance part. This knowledge can't be seen or even properly measured, though. So how does this relate to EL learners? Well, the iceberg you can imagine is English. What our learners can produce is above, and everything else they know, even if they can't quite explain it, is beneath. For EL learners, they have two icebergs that are merged together, one for their native language and one for English. Now, these icebergs aren't likely the same size, but what's important is down beneath the surface of what we can't see. Knowledge of language isn't neatly compartmentalized. It's stored in one big iceberg of their brain. So sometimes there's transfer between the two languages. This can be positive, like we see with cognates, words that sound or look similar. For example, Spanish and English have some perfect cognates. Actor is actor in both languages. Brutal is brutal. There are tons of these. Even near perfect cognates like concentration and concentración. You can understand exactly what I'm meaning if you don't speak Spanish. However, there's also negative transfer, like false cognates. Éxito in Spanish means success, not exit. This could actually be very bad for a native Spanish speaker. Another one is sopa. Sounds like soap, but is actually soup in Spanish. Don't eat the soap. Now imagine how many times you've had a slip of the tongue, or forgotten a word. Double that and include words that may or may not mean remotely the same thing, and that's how an ELL brain works. Also, when producing, it's not nicely, neatly split double iceberg like we see here. There's a lot of crossing. Sometimes the wrong thing comes out, or they struggle to produce the right English word or sound. It doesn't mean they don't know it or that's not down there. Just everything else might be getting in the way. We can see this with our native speakers too, though, especially those with learning disabilities. They know it, just there's some other stuff getting in the way of production or visible knowledge. This is incredibly important to remember when you're working with your learners. They're smart, just struggling a little bit, and that's okay. There are many different lessons that you can prepare for your learners, all based on their goals. This includes EL learners. Discussion is a major part of their learning, especially for EL learners, as many of them want to improve their speaking. Many EL learners have the knowledge. They just need help with practice and producing it. But with all learners, especially so for EL learners, you need to be mindful of their level. The ACTFL, American Council on the Teaching of Foreign Languages scale, is the most commonly trusted measure of language proficiency. You can see what a technique looks like here. It's an inverted pyramid divided into 4 major sections. You can see the 4 colors: novice or beginner, intermediate, advanced, and then superior or distinguished. From there, divided further. When we look at these, we need to remember that all language has 4 dimensions: reading, writing, listening, and speaking. A learner can be more advanced in one skill area than another. For example, some learners can speak and listen at an intermediate level, but they may read and write at a novice level. Keep in mind that any movement up in proficiency is improvement. It can take weeks, months, and even years to be fully fluent in a language. Even then, there are issues and discussions about what fully fluent means. But we aren't striving for perfect English. We just want better English to help our learners achieve their goals. So, where do ELLs start? We test them using the best literacy test. Here is our proficiency levels, our student proficiency levels here. This grades mostly reading and writing proficiency, but we generally use this as an estimate for speaking and listening. The literacy counselor will give the best literacy test to the learner in this case, letting the literacy counselor obtain an informal assessment of their listening and speaking skills upon introduction. These aren't official or given in the data, but it's something we will note for you to read as well. Just as other adult learners want relevant lessons, ELLs also want to learn skills that will help them in their everyday lives. This means authentic communication is taught along with other linguistic skills. We call this approach the Communicative Language Approach, or CLA. We focus on improving their communication skills, meaning ability to communicate, convey, and understand meaningful messages and content. This goes from survival skills, such as sight words and asking phrases, to job-specific content. This is also a learner-centered approach that helps the learner achieve their personal goals. CLA is all about language in the community and communicating, so realistic examples work best and are what our EL learners are interested in. But there is something just as important to asking what our learners want to learn when it comes to ELLs, and that's asking ourselves what they need to know. Communication and the ability to clearly communicate is always the goal of ESL education, regardless of other goals. Very low ELLs need survival English instruction and may require some very basic lessons in reading and writing. So, just what is survival English? It's what you think it might be, though it might be almost too obvious. It's the ability to introduce yourself. Hi, my name is Sandra. I'm from Missouri. And the ability to recognize an introduction and respond properly. It's also being able to recognize and answer simple questions like, are you all right? Are you hurt? Do you need help? Do you have children? And the ability to answer how many. It also includes being able to ask questions like, where's a hotel? Where's the bathroom? Can you help me? Do you speak Spanish? Whatever language. This is incredibly important for them to know and understand, as these learners will have a translator with them that you will be working with that may or may not always be there for them in the outside world. The newcomer materials in the back of your packet show what some of these materials look like and some other techniques. Another important part is practice. Practice, practice, practice. You need your learner to practice their skills as much as possible, especially since they can't or won't be able to at home. Encourage your learner to talk during your sessions and try to find ways to have them talk and practice at home, whether this be calling you or finding a pen pal. Practice is the only way real language learning can happen. Repetitive and realistic practice. You can even give real-life task assignments like making a phone call or asking questions at the store, something that is relevant to their goals and their circumstances. From practice, we come to the question of fluency. You likely will hear your ELL say they want to be fluent in English, but what does that really mean? They probably think it's speaking or sounding like a native English speaker. But then it begs the question of, what does a native English speaker sound like? Someone from New York does not sound like someone from Illinois. And someone born and raised in the South does not sound or speak like someone born and raised in Seattle. But all 4 of these hypotheticals are native English speakers. So just what is fluency? Fluency is the ability to communicate clearly without many interruptions and stops and starts. It means that the person is able to come up with enough correct words to get their point across. It doesn't mean speaking perfectly and grammatically perfect. It doesn't mean that a person never makes a mistake. Pretty sure I've made a couple already. Native English speakers make mistakes and speak improperly all the time. No one speaks correct grammar when they're talking to their mom. But with those mistakes and impropriety, we still clearly understand each other and get our point across. However, correcting mistakes as the learner is making them during your sessions may make the learner stop trying to draw on fluency resources such as self-correction. Generally, you don't want to correct them. This can make them self-conscious and not encourage self-correction. Instead, ask them to repeat it. Maybe even repeat the word they're having issues with to let them hear it, and then have them say the line again. Regardless of how a learner tests or how proficient they seem, it is important that you teach them certain important phrases and vocabulary. These can be very basic greetings or the ability to say their name and phone number. You know, the survival English stuff. You can customize what counts as survival English for your learner based on what they know, their level, and their goals. This all ties in with fluency and being able to clearly communicate these. Some important questions to make sure they know are: how do you spell blank? Can you repeat that? Can you explain that? You can see some others as well, such as, can you speak more slowly? I don't understand. One of the best resources for your learners, especially EL learners, is something we've said time and time again: real-world resources. This lets them interact with the language and material in context. There are tons of free materials online, and we have level newspapers you can use. Some other examples of materials that are useful are menus, business cards, forms, application, receipts, and price tags. You can ask learners what they want to know and ask them to bring in the materials, or you might even have some yourself already. We can also get any materials for you that you might need. There are some more examples as well in your packet. Another important material you will want to go over with your ELs, if and only if they mention it and it applies, are citizenship materials. It shouldn't be the only focus though, but they are important practice materials. As a review, many materials designed for ELLs will work well for native English speakers as well. There are a ton of free ELL and ESL materials online that can be used with native English speakers if you're having issues coming up with materials yourself. The biggest difference between the groups is that native English speakers usually don't need the cultural context or speaking listening instruction that many ELLs need or want. And while many of the materials and techniques are usable for native English speakers and ELLs, remembering cultural context and that they are coming from different backgrounds and places of knowledge is incredibly important. If you ever have any questions regarding your ESL or EL learner, please let your literacy counselor know. It can present a challenge, but it's also incredibly rewarding and you will likely learn something as well. That's it for this video, and as we reach the end of our training, congratulations. We'll see you next time. Make sure you have any questions.